5 years after that stormy night when Lyra first knocked on Marcus's door, Kepler 442b had become the most important world in human space, not for its resources or strategic position, but for what it represented, proof that humanity could grow beyond itself. The Harmony Stations, as the hybrid settlements had come to be known, now housed over 2 million beings from 47 different species. The original architectural style, biological and mechanical systems, working in perfect integration, had spread across 3 continents and was being adapted for use on 17 other worlds. Marcus stood in the Grand Assembly Hall, a living building that had grown rather than been constructed, watching as representatives from across the galaxy gathered for the first Interstellar Cooperation Council. The hall itself was a marvel that embodied everything they had learned about multi-species collaboration. The walls processed atmospheric composition in real time to accommodate beings with different respiratory needs. The floors adapted their texture and temperature for hundreds of different physiologies. The lighting system could shift across spectrums visible to every known form of sight. But the real miracle wasn't the technology. It was what filled that space. Beings who had learned to see diversity as strength rather than threat. Lyra, now serving as the first director of interspecies relations, addressed the assembly in a voice that carried across multiple communication methods simultaneously. Her children, grown into young adults, worked throughout the hall as translators and facilitators, their natural ability to bridge different forms of consciousness making them invaluable diplomats. Friends from distant stars, Lyra began. We gather today not as separate peoples seeking advantage over each other, but as participants in the greatest experiment ever attempted. Can intelligence life expand across the galaxy without destroying what makes each world unique? In the 5 years since the restoration of the Southern Dead Zone, that question had driven innovations that transformed entire civilizations. The biomechanical integration techniques pioneered on Kepler 442b had been adapted to help dying worlds heal themselves. The cooperative methodologies developed by mixed species teams had resolved conflicts that had lasted centuries. Most remarkably, they had discovered that diversity itself was a form of technology. Each species brought unique perspectives and capabilities that, when properly integrated, could solve problems that had seemed impossible. Dr. Rodriguez, now director of the Galactic Restoration Project, presented the latest statistics. In the past year alone, our joint efforts have restored 17 dead worlds, resolved 43 resource conflicts through cooperative development, and established sustainable expansion protocols for over 200 civilizations. But the real success stories were personal. Families like Lyra's, who had faced extinction, now thrived in communities where their children played with dozens of different species. Researchers like Marcus, who had devoted their careers to understanding alien life, now worked daily with beings whose very existence expanded the definition of possible. Elder Thane, his great age now evident but his mind still sharp, served as one of the council's senior advisors. He had lived to see his people not just survive, but become teachers showing others how to transform crisis into opportunity. The pattern we have established here is spreading, he reported to the assembly. The galactic communication networks carry word of our methods to civilizations facing their own challenges. But more importantly, they carry word of our principles. That growth can mean addition rather than replacement. That strength comes from cooperation rather than conquest. Sarah Chen, now colonial administrator for the entire Kepler system, presented the proposal that would define humanity's future among the stars. The Earth government has asked us to establish expansion protocols for human civilization. Based on what we've learned here, we propose the Harmony Doctrine. No human expansion that doesn't include cooperation with existing intelligent life. No resource extraction that doesn't enhance local ecosystems. No technological development that doesn't consider impact on galactic diversity. The proposal sparked intense discussion among the representatives. Some civilizations that had expanded through conquest worried about the implications for their own territories. Others, inspired by the success on Kepler 442b, wanted to implement similar protocols immediately. But it was the youngest voices that carried the day. Aurea, now a prominent biomechanical engineer, stood with her partner Tommy and representatives from dozens of worlds to present what they called the Next Generation Project. Our elders debate whether cooperation is possible, Aurea said. her skin showing patterns of conviction mixed with hope. But we who grew up together don't understand why there was ever any doubt. We don't see separate species working together. We see one galactic civilization with many expressions. Tommy nodded, gesturing to the mixed group around him. We propose not just expansion protocols, but transformation protocols. Ways to help civilizations evolve beyond the limitations that competition and scarcity thinking have imposed on them. Their presentation included holographic displays of projects already underway, star systems where multiple species work together to manage stellar evolution, artificial worlds designed from the beginning to support hundreds of different forms of life, and communication networks that could facilitate real-time cooperation across galactic distances. But the most ambitious proposal came from the Sky Dancers, speaking through energy patterns that painted meanings directly in the air. The young ones dream of healing not just worlds, but the wounds between civilizations. They envision not just cooperation, but conscious evolution of intelligence itself. As the day's formal sessions ended, Marcus found himself walking through the memorial garden that had been established where his original research station once stood. Plaques in hundreds of languages honored the moment when one desperate mother's plea had changed the course of galactic history. Lyra joined him there, as she often did when important decisions were being made. Her youngest child, now a teenager, was practicing atmospheric manipulation with a group of Sky Dancer youth, creating aurora patterns that told stories in light. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't opened that door?" Lyra asked. Marcus smiled, watching as children of a dozen different species played games that couldn't exist anywhere else in the galaxy. "I try not to think about it. Some choices are too important to second guess. The Council will approve the Harmony Doctrine," Lyra said with certainty. "Not because the adults are convinced, but because the children won't accept any other future." She was right. The vote the next day was overwhelming. Not just for the Harmony Doctrine, but for the establishment of the Galactic Cooperation Network, with Kepler 442b as its center and the hybrid settlements as its model. Within months, similar projects were being established across human space and beyond. The restoration techniques were being applied to damaged worlds throughout the galaxy. The cooperative methodologies were being taught in schools on thousands of different planets. But the real change was deeper than policy or technology. It was a shift in how intelligent beings thought about their place in the universe. Competition gave way to collaboration. Scarcity thinking was replaced by abundance through diversity. The fear of the unknown was transformed into curiosity about the possible. As Marcus prepared for his next assignment, leading an expedition to contact a newly discovered civilization in the Andromeda Galaxy, he reflected on how far they had all come. Humanity had set out to claim the stars and instead had learned to be worthy of them. The final scenes in the Grand Assembly Hall showed representatives from across the galaxy working together on plans that spanned millennia, projects to guide the evolution of entire star systems, protocols for contact with dimensions beyond normal spacetime, dreams of consciousness itself expanding beyond the boundaries of individual species or worlds. And at the center of it all, the children who had never known a universe divided by fear continued to imagine futures that their elders could barely comprehend. The storm that had driven Lyra to Marcus's door had ended long ago. But the journey it had begun was just reaching its first milestone. As the representatives departed for their home worlds, carrying with them plans and hopes that would reshape galactic civilization, one thing was clear. The greatest human characteristic wasn't the ability to conquer or to dominate. It was the ability to recognize the worth of others and the wisdom to grow beyond what they had been. In opening his door to a desperate mother and her children, Marcus had opened a pathway to a future where humanity's expansion across the stars would be remembered, not for what it took, but for what it gave. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders yet to be discovered. And for the first time in the history of intelligent life, those wonders would be explored not by conquerors, but by partners in the endless adventure of conscious evolution. As Lyra often said to her children when they asked about the future, "Every door we open leads to new possibilities, and every hand we extend in friendship makes us all stronger." The stars were calling, and finally, intelligence had learned how to answer with wisdom instead of merely with power. The southern dead zone stretched before them like a scar across the planet's surface. Where once there had been vibrant ecosystems, Now only crystallized soil and twisted metallic formations remained. The climate changes had created a feedback loop of destruction that poisoned the ground and made the air itself toxic to most forms of life. Marcus stood at the edge of the devastation with representatives of all 5 species. The first meeting with the other planetary inhabitants had been unlike anything humanity had ever experienced. The deep singers communicated through vibrations that seemed to come from the planet itself. The crystal gardeners appeared as geometric patterns of living mineral that shifted and recombined as they moved. The sky dancers manifested as flowing energy patterns that barely touched the ground. Your instruments cannot detect the true scope of the damage, rumbled a deep singer through the translation device Dr. Rodriguez had hastily constructed. The poison reaches into the planet's neural networks, disrupting the consciousness that connects all living systems. Dr. Wright ran his scanners across the dead soil, getting readings that made no sense according to human science. The contamination isn't just chemical or biological. There's some kind of quantum disruption in the fundamental structure of matter here. That is why restoration seemed impossible, Thane explained. Each species has tried to heal this wound using their own methods. The damage is too complex for any single approach, Rhea, now recognized as a prodigy even among the remarkable young beings emerging from the human-Zephyrian collaboration, knelt and placed her hand on the poisoned ground. Her skin showed patterns of deep concentration mixed with something that looked like pain. "It hurts the planet," she said simply, "like a wound that can't heal because it keeps getting infected." Tommy Chen, her human partner in innovation, pulled out a device they had built together over the past weeks. It looked like a cross between a medical scanner and a biomechanical interface, covered in living circuits that pulsed with soft light. "We've been thinking about this wrong," Tommy said, his young voice carrying surprising authority. "Everyone's trying to heal the land by removing the poison. But what if we could teach the land to transform the poison into something useful?" The adult representatives of all 5 species turned to stare at the 2 youngsters. The concept was so simple yet so radical that none of their sophisticated minds had considered it. Dr. Rodriguez knelt beside them. "Explain your thinking." Arya's skin showed excitement patterns as she began to demonstrate. "In our old homes, when toxins entered the biosystems, we didn't try to remove them. We adapted them, made them part of the system's function. The poison becomes the cure. But this level of contamination," Elder Thane began, then stopped as he watched Tommy's device interface with Arya's bioluminescent abilities. The combination of human technology and Zephyrian biology was creating readings he had never seen before. "We can see the pattern now," Tommy said, his device translating Arya's biological perceptions into data the adults could understand. "The contamination follows specific pathways through the ground. It's not random, it's creating a network." A crystal gardener shifted closer, its geometric form rearranging itself to study the data. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes made of stone. "Network implies purpose. Perhaps the damage is not destruction, but reorganization." One of the sky dancers descended from the upper atmosphere, its energy form creating aurora-like patterns in the air around them. "The young ones perceive what we could not. The wound seeks to become something new." Marcus felt the familiar thrill of scientific breakthrough. "You're suggesting that the dead zone isn't actually dead, it's transforming into something we don't recognize as life." "Exactly," Arya said, her excitement making her glow brighter. "But the transformation is stuck, incomplete. It needs help from all of us working together." What followed was the most complex cooperative effort in recorded galactic history. Each species contributed their unique understanding and capabilities. The Deep Singers used their connection to the planet's geological systems to map the contamination network in 3 dimensions. The Crystal Gardeners identified mineral components that could be restructured into new forms of life. The Sky Dancers provided atmospheric processing that could transform toxic gases into beneficial compounds. Humans contributed their engineering expertise and ability to manufacture precise tools on a massive scale. Zephyrians provided the biological integration that could bridge the gap between living and non-living systems. But it was the children who provided the crucial element, the ability to think beyond the limitations that experience had imposed on their elders. Working in mixed teams, young beings from all 5 species began to implement a restoration plan that resembled nothing any civilization had ever attempted. Instead of fighting the contamination, they guided it. Instead of destroying the poisoned networks, they convinced them to evolve. The process took weeks of careful, delicate work. Human mining equipment was biomechanically modified to become surgical instruments operating on a planetary scale. Zephyrian biotechnology was enhanced with crystal gardener mineral processing to create new forms of symbiotic life. Deep singer harmonics were amplified through human acoustics to carry healing frequencies deep into the planets. Core. Sky Dancer atmospheric manipulation was coordinated with human weather control systems to create precipitation patterns that would nourish the emerging ecosystem rather than poison it. And through it all, the children led the way, their natural adaptability allowing them to coordinate technologies and abilities that their elders struggled to integrate. The breakthrough came during the planetary alignment that Thane had mentioned. As the gravitational forces of the system's multiple planets created tidal effects that amplified all biological processes, the restoration project reached critical mass. Marcus watched in awe as the dead zone began to pulse with new life. But it wasn't life as any species had known it. The emerging ecosystem was a hybrid, incorporating elements from all 5 civilizations. Plants that were part organic, part crystal, part energy pattern, atmospheric processors that were simultaneously biological organisms and sophisticated machines. "It's working," Dr. Rodriguez breathed, her instruments detecting life signs unlike anything in the galactic databases. The contamination is being transformed into the foundation for an entirely new form of ecosystem. Elder Thane placed his hand on the newly living ground and closed his eyes. "I feel it connecting to the planetary consciousness. The wound is becoming a bridge to something greater." But the real proof of success came when representatives of the other planetary species formally approached the human delegation. The Deep Singer's communication now carried harmonics of acceptance and welcome. The crystal gardener arranged itself into geometric patterns that Thane translated as symbols of permanent alliance. The Sky Dancer's energy patterns painted promises of shared knowledge across the sky. "You have proven something we believed impossible," the Deep Singer rumbled, "that a species can expand across the galaxy without destroying what it finds. That growth can mean addition rather than replacement." Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she responded. "We couldn't have done this alone. This success belongs to all of us." The Sky Dancer's voice carried notes like stellar wind. "Then let it be the foundation for something larger. Other worlds face similar challenges. Other species struggle with changes too rapid for adaptation. What we have learned here could heal entire star systems." As the celebrations began in the settlements, with children of all 5 species creating biomechanical light displays that could be seen from orbit, Marcus found himself thinking about the message they would send to Earth. Humanity had come to Kepler 442b seeking a new home, and found something far more valuable. A new way of being human among the stars, not as conquerors or colonizers, but as partners in the greatest project any civilization could undertake: the expansion of life, consciousness, and cooperation across the galaxy. The storm that had driven Lyra to his door had been the beginning of something unprecedented. But Marcus suspected that the real journey was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, as reports of the successful restoration spread through the galactic communication networks that the older species had revealed, other civilizations began to make contact. Some curious, some cautious, but all intrigued by the possibility of expansion without destruction. The children who had led the restoration effort began to dream of even greater projects: star systems that needed healing, civilizations that faced extinction from climate change or resource depletion, the possibility of growth that added to the galaxy's diversity rather than diminishing it. Standing in the restored southern zone, watching a sunset painted the hybrid ecosystem in colors that existed nowhere else in the universe, Marcus understood that humanity's greatest adventure wasn't about conquering space. It was about learning to be worthy of the stars. 3 months after the Great Evacuation, Kepler 442b had become something neither species had imagined possible. The hybrid settlements had evolved beyond simple shelters into thriving communities where human technology and Zephyrian biotechnology created miracles on a daily basis. Marcus stood in the central plaza of what the children had named Harmony Station, watching as human and Zephyrian youngsters played together. The game they had invented involved manipulating light patterns through touch-sensitive biomechanical walls. Human children used handheld devices while Zephyrian children used their natural bioluminescence, creating collaborative art that shifted and flowed across the living architecture. The integration is exceeding all our projections, Dr. Rodriguez reported during the morning briefing. She looked tired but exhilarated, her hair slightly disheveled from another all-night research session. The agricultural yields alone have increased by 400%. The biomechanical systems are repairing themselves, upgrading themselves. We're not just witnessing cooperation between species, we're watching the birth of a new form of life. Sarah nodded, reviewing the data streams that flowed across her tablet. The numbers were staggering. Power efficiency had increased dramatically as Zephyrian biosystems learned to optimize human machinery. Waste recycling had become so efficient that the settlements were actually improving the local environment. Most remarkably, both species were adapting to each other in ways that seemed to accelerate natural evolution. "What about the situation on Earth?" Commander Al-Rashid asked. "Have you received responses to your reports?" Sarah's expression darkened slightly. "Mixed reactions. The scientific community is fascinated. The military is concerned. Politicians are arguing about sovereignty, territorial rights, and whether we had the authority to make contact without approval from Earth Command. 27 light-years away and they still want to micromanage," Marcus muttered. "By the time any message reaches Earth and a response comes back, these children will be adults." "Which brings us to our real challenge," Sarah continued. "We need to prove that this cooperation isn't just a temporary arrangement born of crisis. We need to show Earth, and any other human colonies, that this is the future of human expansion." Elder Thane, who had become the unofficial representative of the Zephyrian refugees, shifted in his chair. The human furniture had been modified with biomechanical components that adapted to his physiology, a small example of the constant innovation happening throughout the settlements. "There is something we have not yet shared with you," Thane said carefully. "Our people were not the only intelligent species on this world. We were simply the most numerous. There are others, deeper in the planet's systems, older and perhaps wiser than we are." The room fell silent. Dr. Wright leaned forward. "Others? How many others?" "3 other primary species," Thane replied. "The deep singers who live in the planet's thermal vents and communicate through subsonic vibrations. The crystal gardeners who have formed symbiotic relationships with the planet's mineral networks. And the sky dancers, who exist primarily in the upper atmosphere and only rarely touch the surface." Marcus felt his world shift again. "You're telling us this planet hosts 4 different intelligent species?" "5 now," Thane corrected gently. "Your people have proven themselves worthy of inclusion in the planetary consciousness. But the others are cautious. They have watched your activities with interest but also with concern." Dr. Rodriguez was already making notes, her scientific mind racing with possibilities and implications. "Do these other species face the same climate challenges you did?" "Each faces their own version of the crisis," Thane replied. "The planet's changes affect all life here, but they have chosen different strategies for survival. Some attempt to slow the changes, others seek to accelerate them. The deep singers believe the planet is evolving towards something greater and that we should embrace the transformation." Sarah stood and walked to the large window that overlooked the settlement. Outside, she could see human engineers working alongside Zephyrian biotechnicians to expand the living architecture. Children of both species ran through gardens that were part playground, part agricultural system, part art installation. "Are they willing to meet with us?" she asked. "That depends," Thane said, "on whether you can prove that humanity's presence here represents growth rather than conquest. The sky dancers in particular have long memories. They have watched other worlds where newcomers destroyed established ecosystems." Marcus joined Sarah at the window. "What kind of proof would they need?" "The deep singers have proposed a test," Thane replied. "There is a failing ecosystem in the southern continent where the climate changes have created a dead zone spanning thousands of square kilometers. If human technology and multi-species cooperation can restore life to that region, they will consider full contact." Commander Al-Rashid frowned. "And if we fail?" Then they will likely conclude that human expansion is incompatible with planetary health. Thane said simply. The consequences of that decision would affect not just this world, but humanity's future in this region of space. Dr. Wright pulled up geological surveys on the main display. The southern dead zone. We've been monitoring it, but our analysis suggested it would take centuries to recover naturally. Naturally, yes, Thane agreed, but with cooperation between all species, with the full knowledge of the planet's systems that only comes from true integration. Perhaps something unprecedented becomes possible. Sarah turned back to the group. How long do we have? The planetary alignment that occurs every 7 months is approaching, Thane replied. It amplifies all biological and geological processes. If we can establish the restoration during this period, the effects will be magnified and sustained. We have approximately 6 weeks. The room buzzed with immediate discussion as each team member began calculating logistics, resource requirements, and technical challenges. But Marcus was thinking about something else entirely. Thane, he said. When Lyra first came to my station, she said her people had been watching us, learning our language. How long have all the species here been preparing for our arrival? Thane's skin showed patterns that Marcus had learned indicated deep consideration. We detected your probe ships decades ago. We have been watching your expansion across the galaxy through various means. Some of us hoped that when contact came, it would be different from the patterns we observed on other worlds. Other worlds? Dr. Rodriguez looked up sharply. You've observed human expansion elsewhere? We are part of a larger network, Thane replied carefully. Information travels between worlds through means your science has not yet discovered. We know of human colonies on 17 different planets. Most follow patterns of resource extraction and environmental modification that concern the older species. Sarah felt the weight of representation settling on her shoulders. Not just for this colony, not just for this world, but for all of humanity's future among the stars. Then we'd better make sure this one is different, she said firmly. Dr. Rodriguez, begin assembling teams for the restoration project. Commander Al-Rashid, coordinate with our engineering staff and Zephyrian technicians. Marcus, I want you to work directly with Thane on establishing communication protocols with the other species. As the meeting broke up, Lyra entered with her children and several human youngsters. The youngest Zephyrian ran directly to Thane, chattering excitedly in their musical language about something they had discovered in the biomechanical gardens. Watching the easy interaction between the children, Marcus felt both hope and responsibility. These young beings had never known a world where their species were separate. For them, cooperation was natural, integration was normal, and the idea of conquest or domination seemed absurd. Thane, he said quietly, whatever test the other species have planned, I think we have our secret weapon. Thane followed Marcus's gaze to the children and smiled. Indeed. The young ones adapt fastest, fear least, and dream largest. Perhaps they will show us all how to become something greater than the sum of our parts. Outside, the twin suns of Kepler 442b began to set, casting their ethereal light across a settlement that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. As night fell, the bioluminescent elements of the architecture began to glow, creating patterns of light that pulsed in harmony with the heartbeats of 5 different species. Tomorrow they would begin the greatest test of interspecies cooperation ever attempted. But tonight, they simply marveled at how far they had come from that stormy evening when a desperate mother knocked on a human door and asked for shelter. The future of humanity among the stars would be decided in the coming weeks. But for the first time since leaving Earth, humans wouldn't be facing that future alone. The rescue operation began at dawn. Human engineering teams worked alongside Zephyrian guides to locate the failing underground settlements. What they found challenged every assumption about how civilizations could exist. The Zephyrian cities were living organisms, vast networks of bioluminescent chambers connected by tunnels that pulsed like arteries. Captain Lisa Park led the first rescue team into the depths, following Arya through passages that seemed to breathe around them. The walls themselves provided light, but that light was failing as the organisms died from the changing environmental. Conditions, it's like being inside a dying whale. One of the engineers whispered as they moved through a massive chamber where hundreds of Zephyrians huddled together for warmth. Not dying, Arya corrected softly, transforming, but too quickly for my people to adapt. The sight that greeted the rescue teams was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Zephyrian families clustered around failing biolumens, their skin dim with exhaustion and hunger. Children clung to adults whose normally shimmering appearance had turned dull and gray. Yet despite their suffering, they showed no aggression toward the humans, only curiosity and cautious hope. Elder Thane, the leader of this settlement, approached the rescue team with dignity and tact. Despite his obvious weakness, he was ancient by Zephyrian standards, his skin showing intricate patterns that spoke of centuries of accumulated wisdom. You are the ones who helped Lyra and her young, he said to Captain Park. We felt her gratitude through the deep connections. It reached us even here. Park activated her translation device, though the Zephyrians seemed to understand human speech well enough. Elder Thane, we're here to evacuate your people to safety. Our ships can transport everyone to temporary shelters on the surface. Thane's large eyes reflected sadness. To leave the deep places means to abandon 10,000 years of growth. These chambers, these connections, they are not just our homes. They are our history, our culture, our very identity. Dr. Rodriguez, who had accompanied the rescue team, stepped forward. Elder, I know this is difficult, but would your history mean anything if your people died? We can help you build new connections, new homes that incorporate both human technology and Zephyrian wisdom. As they spoke, more rescue teams reported in from other settlements. The scale of the crisis was staggering. 7 major cities, each housing thousands of individuals, all facing imminent collapse. Human transport vehicles couldn't possibly evacuate everyone before the next storm hit. That's when Lyra proposed something unprecedented. We don't need to move everyone immediately, she said during an emergency planning session. We can create hybrid shelters. Human structural engineering combined with Zephyrian bioadaptation. Temporary refuges that can withstand the storms while we plan permanent solutions. Marcus looked at the display showing their limited resources. The construction materials alone would take weeks to fabricate. We don't have that time. We don't need to fabricate, Lyra replied. We can grow. She led a mixed team of humans and Zephyrians to a suitable site near the largest failing settlement. What happened next would become legendary among both species. Lyra and 5 other adult Zephyrians joined hands in a circle, their bodies beginning to glow with synchronized patterns. The ground beneath them began to change. Not suddenly or violently, but with organic purpose. Plant-like structures emerged, growing and interweaving with geometric precision. Human engineers watched in amazement as the Zephyrians guided the growth, creating walls that were both living tissue and structural material. Incredible, Dr. Rodriguez breathed. They're creating a biomechanical hybrid. The structure is alive but follows architectural principles. But the process was taking its toll on the Zephyrians. Their light grew dimmer as they poured their life energy into the growing shelter. One by one, they began to falter. They're killing themselves, Dr. Wright observed, monitoring their vital signs. The energy expenditure is beyond their current capabilities. That's when the humans stepped in with something the Zephyrians had never experienced. Technological support for biological processes. Dr. Rodriguez quickly modified a portable power generator, creating an interface that could feed energy into the Zephyrian bionetwork. Try this, she said, connecting the device to Lyra's hand. Our machines can provide the power your bodies need. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The shelter's growth accelerated, walls becoming stronger and more complex. Windows formed that could adapt their transparency based on external conditions. Air filtration systems that were half living, half mechanical created perfect atmospheric conditions inside. Within 6 hours, they had created something that was greater than the sum of its parts, a shelter that could house 500 individuals, protect them from the planet's worst weather, and adapt to changing conditions in real time. Elder Thane was among the first to enter the hybrid shelter. He placed his hand on the living wall and closed his eyes. I feel it, he whispered. The old connections and the new ones, past and future, joined together. The success of the first hybrid shelter inspired both species. More construction teams formed, each one learning from the previous attempts. Humans contributed engineering expertise, power systems, and manufacturing capabilities. Zephyrians provided biological integration, environmental adaptation, and the kind of intuitive understanding that came from millennia of symbiotic living. But it was the children who made the breakthrough that would change everything. Arya, working with a human engineer named Tommy Chen who was only a few years older, discovered something remarkable. While adults struggled to fully integrate biological and mechanical systems, the young minds of both species seemed naturally capable of bridging the gap. "Look," Arya said excitedly. Her skin showing patterns that Tommy had learned meant discovery and joy. "If we think of it not as two different things but as one thing with two expressions," Tommy nodded, understanding immediately. Together, they redesigned the power coupling systems, creating interfaces that were neither purely biological nor purely mechanical, but something entirely new. Word of their innovation spread quickly. Soon, young humans and Zephyrians were working together throughout the rescue operation, their natural adaptability allowing them to accomplish what their elders found difficult. As the storm clouds gathered on the horizon, the last evacuation transport lifted off from the deepest settlement. Elder Thane took one final look at the ancient chambers that had been his people's home for generations. "We are not the same people who entered these depths 10,000 years ago," he said to Captain Park, "and we will not be the same when we emerge into this new world. Perhaps that is as it should be." The transport rose through the planet's atmosphere, carrying the last refugees toward safety. Below them, the storm began to rage, flooding the ancient caverns and destroying what remained of the old Zephyrian civilization. But above ground, in the hybrid shelters that represented something entirely unprecedented in galactic history, two species prepared to face the future together. The storm would pass, but the bonds being forged in those shelters would endure. As Lyra held her youngest child and watched the lightning illuminate the alien sky, she felt something she had never experienced before. Hope not just for survival, but for transformation into something greater. "Mother," her daughter whispered, "the human children want to teach us their games, and we want to show them how to sing to the walls." Lyra smiled. "Then perhaps the best of both worlds begins now." The journey to New Geneva took 6 hours across the planet's rugged terrain. Marcus drove the all-terrain vehicle while Lyra and her children marveled at the human technology. The youngest child, who couldn't have been more than 5 in human terms, pressed her face against the window and giggled at the bouncing motion. "Your machines are so rigid," Lyra observed as they navigated a particularly rough patch. "But effective. We have always grown our transportation, shaped it from living materials. Perhaps there is wisdom in both approaches." As they traveled, Lyra shared more about Zephyrian society. They were a collective species not in the sense of a hive mind, but in their deep connection to their environment and each other. Their technology was biological, their cities living organisms that grew and adapted over time. They had no concept of ownership as humans understood it, seeing themselves as caretakers rather than possessors of their world. "Your people will struggle to understand us," Lyra said, as New Geneva came into view. "We do not think as you do. Competition, hierarchy, individual achievement. These concepts are foreign to us. Yet you have accomplished things we could never imagine." New Geneva was humanity's first serious attempt at an off-world city. Built in the shelter of a massive cliff face, it housed nearly 50,000 colonists in interconnected domes and underground facilities. The architecture was purely functional, designed to withstand the planet's harsh weather while providing maximum protection and efficiency. As their vehicle approached the main gate, Marcus could see crowds gathering. Word had spread quickly through the colony's communication networks. Some faces showed curiosity, others fear. Security personnel waited with weapons ready, though their posture suggested caution rather than hostility. Sarah met them at the administrative complex, flanked by the colony's senior staff. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the chief scientist Dr. James Wright, the medical officer, and Commander Hassan al-Rashid, head of security. All of them stared in fascination as Lyra and her children emerged from the vehicle. "My God," Dr. Rodriguez whispered. "They're beautiful." Lyra's children stayed close to their mother, clearly overwhelmed by the sight of so many humans. The eldest spoke quietly in their native language, a series of harmonic tones that seemed almost musical. Lyra responded, then addressed the human delegation. "I know our appearance frightens some of your people, she said, noting the armed guards. We mean no harm. We seek only cooperation and mutual survival. Commander al-Rashid stepped forward, his military bearing evident but not threatening. Ma'am, I need to ask about your people's capabilities.
Do you have weapons?
Military technology? Lyra tilted her head considering the question. We do not wage war as you understand it. When threatened, we adapt. We become harder to find, harder to hurt, but we do not seek to harm others. Adaptation is defense, Dr. Rodriguez murmured, making notes on her tablet. Fascinating. Their entire evolutionary strategy seems based on symbiosis rather than dominance. Sarah gestured toward the administrative building. Let's continue this discussion inside. Lyra, your children must be tired. As they moved into the complex, Marcus noticed how the Zephyrians reacted to human architecture. They seemed uncomfortable with the straight lines and rigid angles, frequently reaching out to touch walls as if trying to communicate with them. The youngest child made soft trilling sounds that seemed to be some form of echolocation. In the main conference room, Lyra shared the full scope of her people's crisis. The underground cavern systems that had protected them for millennia were failing. Climate changes triggered by the planet's unstable core were causing massive flooding and temperature fluctuations. Traditional Zephyrian biotechnology couldn't adapt fast enough to the rapidly changing conditions. How many of your people are at risk? Sarah asked. All of us, Lyra replied simply. Perhaps 30,000 individuals across 7 major settlements. We estimate less than a year before our civilization collapses entirely. The room fell silent as the humans absorbed this information. Dr. Wright leaned forward. What kind of help do you need from us? Shelters that can withstand the flooding. Power sources independent of biological systems. Food production that doesn't rely on the failing ecosystem. Lyra paused. But we offer much in return. Knowledge of this planet that could ensure your colony's survival. Biotechnology that could revolutionize your medicine and agriculture. Dr. Rodriguez's eyes lit up. The agricultural data you showed us earlier. You could really help our crop failures? More than help, Lyra said. She gestured to her eldest child, who stepped forward shyly. My daughter Arya has studied your farming attempts. Show them. Arya touched the conference table's surface and her skin began to glow. Suddenly, holographic displays filled the air above the table, showing detailed soil analysis, root system patterns, and symbiotic relationships that human sensors had never detected. Your plants fail because you try to grow them alone, Arya explained in careful English. On our world, nothing grows alone. Each plant needs partner organisms, specific bacteria, fungi networks. You fight the soil instead of joining it. Dr. Rodriguez stared at the displays, her scientific mind racing. This is incredible. With this knowledge, we could increase crop yields by orders of magnitude. Commander al-Rashid remained skeptical. And what guarantees do we have that you're telling the truth? How do we know this isn't some elaborate deception? Lyra stood, her form seeming to shift slightly in the artificial light. Commander, your people have a saying. Actions speak louder than words. Let us prove our intentions. She moved to the wall and placed both hands against it. Her skin began to glow more brightly, and suddenly the entire room's environmental systems came alive. The temperature stabilized at perfect comfort levels. The air circulation improved dramatically, and even the lighting seemed more natural. I have temporarily integrated with your building systems, Lyra explained. I can feel the stress points in your infrastructure, the inefficiencies in your power distribution. With permission, I could optimize them. Dr. Wright pulled out his medical scanner and pointed it at Lyra. Amazing. She's somehow interfacing directly with our computer systems using bioelectric fields. The level of control required? We are what you might call living computers, Lyra said. But we think of ourselves as bridges between the living and the mechanical. Perhaps together we can build something neither of our peoples could achieve alone. Sarah looked around the room, seeing the wonder and possibility in her colleagues' faces. But she also saw the fear and uncertainty. This decision would affect not just the colony, but potentially all of humanity. Lyra, she said finally, I want to help your people, but I need to contact Earth, inform them of this situation. The political implications? There is no time for politics, Lyra interrupted gently. The next storm cycle begins tomorrow. Many of my people will die if we cannot reach them soon. Marcus stepped forward. Sarah, we have an opportunity here to show Earth what humanity is capable of. Not conquest or exploitation, but cooperation and compassion. This is our chance to prove that we're ready to be part of something larger than ourselves." Sarah looked at her brother, then at the alien family that had sought refuge from a storm. In their eyes, she saw not threats or invaders, but people hoping for a chance at survival. "Commander Al-Rashid," she said, "prepare rescue teams, Dr. Rodriguez, Dr. Wright. Work with our guests to plan the most effective approach. We're going to save as many Zephyrians as we can." As the room erupted in activity, Lyra's youngest child tugged at her mother's cloak and whispered something in their musical language. Lyra smiled and nodded. "My daughter says the walls of this place feel kinder now," she translated. "She thinks your people have good hearts." Sarah smiled back. "Tell her that her mother's courage has given us all hope." Dawn came slowly to Kepler 442b, the planet's twin suns casting an ethereal glow through the dissipating storm clouds. Marcus had barely slept, spending most of the night observing his unexpected guests and learning about their remarkable abilities. The Zephyrian mother, who had introduced herself as Lyra, possessed knowledge that challenged everything humanity thought they knew about this world. "Your people think this planet is uninhabited," Lyra said as she helped her children consume a nutrient paste that somehow materialized from her own body. "But we have been here for over 10,000 of your years. We simply live differently." Marcus watched in fascination as the children's appearances shifted slightly in the morning light. Their skin adapted to the new illumination, becoming more translucent near the windows. It was living camouflage, an evolutionary marvel that explained why human surveys had never detected them. "Why reveal yourselves now?" Marcus asked, offering some human ration bars which the children examined with scientific curiosity. Lyra's expression grew grave. "Because we are dying. The planet's climate is changing faster than we can adapt. Your arrival has accelerated something that was already happening. The deep caverns flood now during storms. The bioluminescent organisms we depend on for food are failing. We need help." Marcus felt the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. He was just a researcher, not a diplomat or military leader. But he was also the first human to learn that Earth's newest colony world already had intelligent inhabitants facing extinction. "There are others like you?" he asked. "Thousands," Lyra replied, "scattered across the underground networks. But our communication systems have been failing. Many communities are cut off, starving. When I heard about your research station, I knew I had to try. Human technology might be our only hope." The eldest of her children, who appeared to be roughly equivalent to a human teenager, stepped forward. "Mother, show him the deep knowledge," the young Zephyrian said in accented but clear English. Lyra hesitated, then placed her hand against the wall. Her skin began to glow, and suddenly the metal surface came alive with complex patterns of light. Data streams flowed across the wall like living circuits, displaying information that made Marcus's mind reel. "This is our understanding of the planet," Lyra explained. "Geological patterns, weather systems, biological networks that your instruments cannot detect. We have mapped the quantum fluctuations in the planet's core that drive the climate changes." Marcus stared at the display, recognizing sophisticated mathematical models that were decades ahead of human science. The Zephyrians hadn't just survived on this world. They had developed a deep intuitive understanding of its fundamental systems. "This could save both our peoples," Marcus breathed. "If we combine human technology with your knowledge—" "Yes," Lyra said simply. "But first, your kind must accept that we exist. And that will not be easy." Marcus knew she was right. Earth Command would be suspicious, fearful. The discovery of intelligent alien life would send shockwaves through human society. Military leaders would worry about threats. Scientists would demand extensive studies. Politicians would argue about territorial rights and resource allocation. But Marcus also knew something else. The human colonists already on Kepler 442b were facing their own challenges. The weather patterns had been more severe than predicted. Crop yields were failing. Without understanding the planet's true nature, the human colony might fail within a generation. "I need to contact the main colony," Marcus said. "The administrator there, Sarah Chen, she's my sister. If anyone would listen with an open mind, it would be her." Lyra nodded. "Time is short. The next storm cycle begins in 3 days. Many of my people will not survive it without help." Marcus moved to the communication console, praying that the storm hadn't damaged the long-range transmitters beyond repair. As he worked to establish contact with New Geneva, the main human settlement, he could hear the Zephyrian children chattering quietly among themselves. Despite everything, they seemed remarkably resilient, adapting to their new environment with the curiosity typical of young beings everywhere. The console crackled to life, and Sarah's voice came through clearly. "Marcus, thank God you're alive! We've been trying to reach you since the storm hit. Sarah, I'm fine, but I need to tell you something. You're not going to believe this, but I have 3 alien refugees in my station." The silence on the other end stretched for long seconds. When Sarah finally spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. "Marcus, you've been alone for weeks. The isolation can play tricks on your mind. Are you sure you're not hallucinating?" "I'm sending you video feed now," Marcus replied, adjusting the communication array. The screen flickered, then stabilized, showing Lyra and her children clearly. On the other end of the transmission, Sarah gasped. "Dear God. Marcus, what have you done?" "What I had to do," Marcus replied firmly. "Sarah, they need our help. And we need theirs. They have knowledge about this planet that could save the entire colony." Through the video link, Sarah stared at the alien family. Her training as a colonial administrator warred with her instincts as a human being. "The protocol—" "Forget the protocols," Marcus interrupted. "Look at them, Sarah, really look. They're not invaders or threats. They're refugees. A mother trying to save her children." Lyra stepped into view of the camera. "Administrator Chen," she said formally, "I know our presence complicates your mission here, but perhaps we can help each other. Your crops are failing because you do not understand the soil symbiosis patterns. Your weather predictions are wrong because you cannot detect the subsurface thermal networks. We can teach you." Sarah leaned forward, studying Lyra's face. As an administrator, she had to consider the political and social ramifications. But as a scientist, she was fascinated by the implications. And as a human being, she could see the desperation in a mother's eyes. "Can you prove what you're saying about the planet?" Sarah asked finally. In response, Lyra placed her hand on the wall again. The display that appeared showed detailed agricultural data, weather prediction models, and geological surveys that were far more accurate than anything human science had achieved. Sarah stared at the information for a long moment. Then she made a decision that would change the course of human history. "Marcus, bring them to New Geneva. Immediately." The rain hammered against the metal walls of the research station like bullets from an angry sky. Dr. Marcus Chen pulled his jacket tighter as he made his way through the dimly lit corridors, the emergency lighting casting long shadows that danced with each flicker. The storm had knocked out the main power grid 3 hours ago, and the backup systems were struggling to keep the essential functions running. Marcus had been stationed on Kepler 442b for 18 months now, studying the planet's unique ecosystem, as part of humanity's first serious attempt at establishing a permanent colony beyond Earth. The planet was beautiful in its own alien way, with purple-tinted forests and crystalline formations that seemed to sing in the wind. But it was also dangerous, home to creatures that defied Earth's understanding of biology. As he reached his quarters, Marcus heard something that made him freeze. A soft tapping sound, rhythmic and deliberate, coming from the main entrance. It was almost midnight, and no human should be outside in this weather. The nearest settlement was over 200 kilometers away, and their communication systems had been down since the storm began. The tapping came again, more urgent this time. Marcus grabbed a plasma torch from the emergency kit and made his way to the entrance. Through the reinforced glass, he could barely make out a figure hunched against the door. The security scanner was offline, but the manual lock still functioned. "Hello?" Marcus called through the intercom, his voice echoing in the empty corridor. The figure straightened, and Marcus saw something that made his heart skip. It was humanoid, but wrong somehow. Too tall, with arms that seemed to bend in impossible ways. But when it spoke, the voice was unmistakably female and filled with a desperation that transcended species. "Please," the voice came through static-filled speakers. "I know you can hear me. My children, they're dying. The storm, it destroyed our shelter. We have nowhere else to go." Marcus's training kicked in. First contact protocols were clear. No unauthorized beings were to be allowed into human facilities without proper quarantine and approval from Earth Command. But Earth was 47 light years away, and any message would take decades to reach them. I can't just let you in," Marcus said, his hand hovering over the door controls. "There are procedures. Protocols." "Please," the voice came again, weaker now. Just for tonight, until the storm passes. My children, they're so cold, so hungry. I'm begging you." Through the glass, Marcus could see smaller shapes huddled behind the larger figure. They were shivering, their forms barely visible in the storm's fury. Whatever these beings were, they were clearly in distress. The maternal desperation in the voice was something Marcus recognized, something that spoke to a universal truth about protecting the young. Marcus had studied xenobiology for 15 years. He knew the risks of contamination, the possibility of hostile intentions, the protocols that existed for good reason. But he also knew what it meant to be a parent. His own daughter was back, on Earth, safe and warm, while these children faced death in the storm. His hand moved to the door control almost without conscious thought. The safety locks disengaged with a soft hiss, and the heavy door began to slide open. The wind immediately rushed in, carrying with it the scent of ozone and something else, something alien but not unpleasant. The figure at the door stepped forward, and Marcus got his first clear look at humanity's first confirmed intelligent alien contact. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with skin that seemed to shimmer between blue and silver. Her features were angular but not harsh, with large eyes that reflected the light like mirrors. Behind her, 3 smaller beings clung to what appeared to be a tattered cloak. "Thank you," she said, and Marcus was surprised to hear no accent, no difficulty with the human language. "I know this is against your laws, but I had no choice." As they stepped inside, Marcus noticed they left no wet footprints despite the rain. Their skin seemed to absorb moisture, adapting to the environment in real time. The children looked up at him with curious eyes, clearly afraid, but trying to be brave for their mother. "How do you know our language?" Marcus asked, securing the door behind them. "We have been watching your kind for some time," she replied. "Learning, preparing. We knew this day would come when our paths would cross. I just never imagined it would be like this." Marcus led them to the common area, where the emergency heating was still functional. As they settled in, the alien mother began to speak of their people, the Zephyrians, who had lived in the planet's underground caverns for millennia. They were a peaceful race, she explained, advanced in biotechnology but struggling with the planet's increasingly violent weather patterns. "The storms have been getting worse," she said, watching her children huddled together near the heating unit. "Our traditional shelters can no longer protect us. Many families have already perished." As Marcus listened, he realized that this moment was about more than just offering shelter from a storm. This was first contact, the moment that would define humanity's relationship with an entire alien civilization. And it had begun not with governments or military forces, but with a mother's plea to save her children. The storm raged outside, but inside the research station, 2 species sat together for the first time, bound by the universal language of compassion and the instinct to protect the innocent. Marcus knew that by morning everything would change. But for now, in this moment, he had done what felt right. He had opened the door,